centered. And of course, we have our handy-dandy little QR code there that people can scan with their phone and get everything that we have online on their phone. So anyway, that's going to start going out to Thayer tomorrow, in fact. I'll be taking that to the post office over there. All right, good to see everybody tonight. Open up to Genesis chapter 2. All right, I want to start somewhere tonight. It's a good idea. Something that I brought up last week, I had somebody ask me a question about, and I want us to talk about it for a minute. And get some things straightened out here. What is an alpha male? Okay, he's the leader of the pack. I was more familiar with that word with like wolves. There's an alpha male in the wolf pack. I used the word last week, beta male, in terms of what happened in the garden with Adam and Eve. What's a beta male? It's a follower. Somebody Google that word. My phone's preoccupied. If alpha male's the top dog, as it's been sometimes said, well, obviously, beta male's below that. When somebody get it, read the definition for us. Okay, a subordinate male animal in a particular group. Does it say anything about humans? Okay, hand me that. I'm not going to remember all that. A man tending to assume a passive or subservient role in social or professional situations. Subservient. Submissive. Okay. Somebody turn over to Mark 10, and I think it's verse 45. Mark 10:45. Like I said, somebody on the way out asked me what exactly I was referring to in terms of a beta male. All right, somebody got Mark 10:45? Okay. He came to serve, didn't he? We are to serve. Somebody turn over to Ephesians 5 and read verse 22. Ephesians 5:22. Like I said, I want to clear the air here and make sure everybody understands what I was saying. That's why, and you guys have heard me say this so many times, define your terms. Know what you're saying. Somebody read that. Ephesians 5:22. Make it verse 21. Submit yourselves to one another. So is it the case that Christians are servants? Yes. Jesus himself was a servant. The way the word beta male, what I mean by that is we see that play out in Genesis chapter 3 that we're going to get to tonight. He didn't assume the proper role. He was passive. And that's kind of the key that I wanted to talk about. The man has a role that started there in the garden, and she took the fruit. And the interesting thing about that text is, when you're looking at it, look at Genesis 3:6. Somebody read the last phrase of Genesis 3:6. Because to whom did the serpent appear in the garden? He appeared to Eve. But there's a clue at the end of verse 6. Somebody read that. She also gave to her husband with her. To me, the implication of that is he was just a passive, he was acting like a beta. He was not being the leader that he should have been. Beta male in our terminology today is not a good thing. Subservient. Now we are to be servants, but we need men who are not passive in their roles. We don't want men, being an alpha male, that typically has a negative connotation. You know, that's the gym bro, chest thumper, domineering, kind of big personality over every. You're not that. A man does that. That doesn't make you a man. It doesn't make you what God wants you to be. But neither does being passive in the role that you're supposed to be fulfilling. Does that make sense? That's what I mean by beta male. Okay. Jesus was a servant. Ephesians 5:21. We're to submit to one another. Well, then you get to Ephesians 5:22. Wives, submit yourselves to your husbands. So there is a hierarchical structure in Scripture. And 1 Corinthians lays this out. God is the head of Christ. Christ is the head of man. Man is the head of woman. There are roles that we are to fulfill. So here's what, any questions or comments on that? That's interesting. Subservient, prepared to obey others unquestioningly. And that's exactly what Adam did. But he didn't obey God. No. So he did something that was asked of him at the time, but in the process of doing that, he obeyed his own master, I guess his creator. So it's almost like to be subservient, he had to not be subservient. Yeah. Well, to be subservient, he wasn't submissive. And there's a difference. All right, thank you, Forrest. All right, so let's get anybody else before we go on? Exactly right. Nobody is to be passive to the point of not obeying God. That's exactly right. And that's what I was trying to get across last week. So if you took that, if I wasn't clear, I'll put it on me. If I wasn't clear, I apologize for that, and hopefully that straightens it out. All right. So let's get to our outline, Genesis 2:21 to 25. Okay, so the word I left you with last week, husbands, men, what was the word I told you to be working on this week for your wife? Learn how to be more helpful. Yeah. So, what? The point I was making was, I don't know who said it or what they said. Somebody said something. The point I was making was that God made Eve to be a helper comparable to Adam. And that's said within the context of all the animals passing before Adam. There's nothing comparable to him, and so God made woman. So that's your first blank here. God has designed that one's mate be helpful in the marriage union, and that's a two-way street. Obviously, males and females have different roles in the home. They have different roles in the church, and I'll say this, and I'll stand by it 100% of the time. A man cannot do what a woman can do, and a woman cannot do what a man can do. We are not equal. We are not superior and inferior. We are different. I mean, you just look at the craziness around us in terms of the transgender ideology. And it's like I was saying last week, it's not in here, I think it was in last week's outline, but one of the points I had in the outline is when you mess with the arrangement of male and female, you mess with God Himself. You mess with His arrangement of everything. Because it's male and female that's the foundation of culture, it's the foundation of the individual home, and for us it's the foundation of the church. When you mess with male and female, you mess with God Himself. I put this in your outline. The Bible is the true liberator of woman. Because what are Christians, conservatives, often accused of in regard to women? Discrimination? Yeah. Yeah. All that. It's not good. The way it's portrayed in the news media, social media, just in culture, and I think that is, and I think that idea is shifting, And I think it's shifting because of the transgender movement. This idea of you've heard of the male, well, not the male, but the white patriarchy in terms of political discussion. You know, this country was established by white men, for white men, all of that historically ignorant talking point political stuff that people have. I think the emphasis on the LGBTQIA plus movement, it changes like monthly. There's one part of it now is 2S, two spirit. All right, all right. So let's think about this for just a minute. I'm making a point here. LGB. And now, of course, you've got the rest of the alphabet on there. What does L stand for? Okay. G. B. Okay. What does bi mean? Fulton County Gospel News is a bi-monthly publication. 2. Have you ever thought about the irony here? That the B in LGB eliminates everything else. It's like they want to keep adding things to it, but they don't understand the implications of what they're doing. Any questions or comments on that before I go on here? Okay. While different, next blank, she is equal. In Christ there is neither male nor female. Now, that's Galatians 3 and verse 28, and that's in context of being a child of God by faith in Christ Jesus. That's in terms of salvation. While man and woman are equal, we also, at the same time, we understand that, again, there are different roles for the male and the female, both in the home, I would say in society at large, and certainly in the church. Verse 24. Somebody read Genesis 2:24. All right. Get that erased. Verse 24 is a statement of God's purpose for marriage. And obviously, the one flesh refers in part, not in the whole, but in part to the sexual union. Somebody turn over to 1 Corinthians 6 and read verse 16, please. 1 Corinthians 6:16. And I want somebody else to get Hebrews 13:4. Who's got 1 Corinthians 6? Who's going to get that one for me? All right, Ashlyn. And who wants Hebrews 13:4? Emily. All right, read them when you get there, please. Yes. Okay, Paul's talking about fornication in that context. If you go out and join yourself to a prostitute, you're one flesh with that person. Now, Hebrews 13:4. Okay, so this is pretty straightforward stuff. The King James says whoremongers. The word there is porneia, fornicators. It's the same word that's in Matthew 19:9 for fornication. The marriage bed is to be undefiled. God's going to judge fornicators and adulterers. Marriage is to be held in honor. So when you put passages like that together, you get a better grasp of what the one flesh is here in Genesis chapter 2 and verse 24. All right? By the way, that's your next blank. The sexual union is exclusively for marriage. Exclusively. Anything else is fornication. Fornication and adultery. Somebody turn to Matthew 5. Who's going to get this one for me? Colin, Matthew 5, I believe it's verse 28. And who wants to get Matthew 19:9? All right, Kelly. I'll get you next, Colton. Read them when you get there. Matthew 5:28, Matthew 19:9.
But I say to you that whoever looks at a woman to lust for her
You look at a woman to lust after her, and what have you done? Committed what? Adultery in your heart. But there's no fornication. All right? All right, now somebody read Matthew 19:9. Okay, so sexual immorality, fornication. You can commit adultery without committing fornication, because Jesus attaches it to the eye and to the. We'll read verse 29 there.
If your right eye causes you to sin, pluck it out and cast it from you, for it is more profitable for you that one of your members perish than for your whole body to be cast into hell.
Jesus isn't just addressing the action of fornication. It starts where? Where does it begin? In the heart. You can commit adultery without ever having sex with another person. But if you're married and you have sex with another person, you're committing adultery. You've committed fornication. We need to understand the definition of those two terms. This is so important because we started our young adults class. We shifted talking from parenting. Now we're dealing with marriage, and right now we're going through all the biblical texts that deal with marriage. We started in Genesis 2, and we're working our way through the Old Testament and the New Testament. And one of the points I made, I think it was this past Sunday, was that I guess you'd say both males and females, but in particular, females have objectified themselves to a point now where it's, again, I think the tide is shifting in culture to get away from the sexualization of everybody, essentially. I mean, if you have a phone, if you have a smartphone, you can make a video of yourself, put it on TikTok or Facebook or Instagram, and if you show the right stuff, how many views do you think you're going to get? Millions upon millions. And you can monetize that, and you can start making money from your body. Something to think about, isn't it? And when you go back to the beginning, this is a sacred union. This is one of the three, marriage, the relationship between a man and a woman is one of the three institutions that God put on this earth. The home, the church, and civil government. And, well, you see what man's done with civil government, and you see what marriage, how cheap it has become in a lot of places. But it's something that if you have kids and grandkids, you need to talk to them about, and we need to study about in Bible class and be very clear on this subject. It's like sometimes we're afraid to talk about this because, I don't think that's appropriate. Well, have you ever read the book of Song of Solomon? Or the passages that address this subject, like 1 Corinthians chapter 7? I mean, the Bible does not pull any punches on this subject, but this seems seemingly a cultural issue, is we don't want to offend anybody and we can't say anything controversial, so we'll just be quiet on that stuff. And that's not good. All right, any questions or comments on any of that? The New Testament confirms the historicity of the creation of man and woman. We're not going to go over that again. Zach covered that. I've covered it a little bit. Jesus based his teaching on marriage on the account recorded in Genesis. Matthew 19. And by the way, Mark chapter 10 is the parallel to that. Mark 10, about verses 1 to 12. Both of those passages are addressing the same issue. God's marriage law began with Adam and Eve. And it still stands today. Jesus gave us one exception, didn't he? For one man and one woman for life. One exception. That's it. And you remember what he said, Matthew 19, I think this is verse 6. Moses, because of the hardness of your hearts, permitted you to put away your wives. But from what? But from the beginning, it was not so. Now again, there is that allotment that Jesus teaches there in Matthew 19. Because the question was, back up in Matthew 19:3, that from the Pharisees, can a man just put away his wife for any cause? No. Not just for any cause. All right. Any questions or comments any further on that section? All right. I want men, guys, I want you to help me out here. In what ways are you currently helpful to your wife? I guess we'll start with Colin. No, I don't. Oh, she wants to hear it too. I was going to say, ladies, I don't want... Let me start over here. I don't want anything from the ladies. I want men. In what ways are you helpful to your wife? Okay, with the kids. All right. What does that mean? Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Do you guys hear what Bryce said? He thinks from his dad's generation to yours, the role of the father has shifted, and I think there's something to that. And that's not a bad thing either. It was, I remember growing up, my dad worked factory 6 days a week. So that takes up a lot of your time, 8 to 10 hours a day, 6 days a week. It's primarily mom taking care of the kids. All right. I think there's a shift in that. What else, men? Who said? Derek? Listening? Okay. No. Well, okay, so Gail does too. I am not as verbal as she is. But there are some men who are more verbal than their wives are. Listening. What else? And it may be, hold on now, before we go on to what else. The listening may be stuff that is like the daily routine stuff, the breakfast table stuff, and what we might call the minutia. But you still got to listen. Nobody else is going to use that word? The minute stuff that in the big scheme of things really doesn't matter, maybe. Meaningless to the... Okay, all right. Men, what else? You're not wrong, Emily. Support, such as? Yeah. I think what you and Bryce are saying, and particularly with what Bryce is saying, it was more like in the past, and I've noticed this shift too in culture, the man was more stoic, quiet, go to work, come home, and work once he gets home, and just let the woman do all the cooking and clean up after the kids, and he's got to go to bed and get up early again tomorrow. And again, I think and maybe it's the way the economy has shifted so, I don't know, but there's been some change in that. So a variety of ways to support your wife, emotionally, spiritually, so on. Sure. There's no doubt about that. Different personalities.
Part of what has caused the shift, it is more difficult for a family to have only one breadwinner anymore. It's a little more, it's not that it's impossible, but it's a bit more challenging. So more wives are working full time than maybe they were the generation or two before now. So you have to balance that when you go home because there is more to do that didn't maybe get done during the day by a stay-at-home mother.
Is it okay for a man to wash dishes? And cook and what things not typically, but maybe let's say 40 to 50 years ago were more what we would consider culturally feminine traits, now are more masculine and feminine. There's nothing wrong with that. What else? Anything else? Talking about how men can be helpful? Jeff cooks breakfast every morning. What time? Oh, almost. Almost. Well, that's a way of supporting you and helping you out. You don't fold clothes. Okay, well, yeah. I've been soundly condemned for my folding. There's a stove I'll show you how to use. Yeah, that's true. Well, the point being, there was no helper comparable to Adam. And it's not that the woman was the only, in the domestic arena, the only one to do any work. There was nobody comparable to him to help him. And so God made her to help him. But that doesn't mean he doesn't help her. You know, it's not one-sided. And I think that has shifted within the last, couple of decades maybe, that it's okay for a man to do what some alpha males might say, that's a woman's job, You want to say something?
When God created Eve, it was to help Adam. What all did Adam have at the time? Do you think it was more of an emotional help? Because as far as we know, Adam kind of had one job, was to kind of tend to the garden.
Keep and dress it.
Name the animals. What all was Eve's role in helping him? Other than he didn't have someone comparable to him in terms of the companion.
I guess I'll answer this briefly. Whatever he needed help doing. And included in that would be the command to be fruitful and multiply. Become one flesh. And again, whatever would accompany that process.
Were they asked to do that before they were married, or was that after? I feel like it was after.
Yeah, it's after.
I don't feel like when she was created that was something they were asked to do.
I don't know.
I believe it was after when he set them out of the garden that they were to go and multiply.
Yeah.
So that kind of eliminates some of, or at least one category of husband and wife.
Well, so I was looking for the verse. It's Genesis 1:28. God blessed them and said, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it and have dominion over it. Remember, Genesis 1 is chronological. Genesis 2 is topical. So it does seem when they were in the garden, they were commanded to do that. Yeah. All right. Absolutely. The women's liberation movement.
Some of it has been good, such
Mm-hmm.
as the male role now in the home to help more because, it's good for little girls to see, hey, daddy's helping, my husband should help. It's a good
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah.
But it has to have the balance so that, because a lot of what we see today is the women's right movement has gone so far as to completely destroy the home.
Yes. And so Jamie makes an excellent point there. The shift in culture has, in some ways, been a good thing. There are essentially 3 waves of feminism. The first wave was like some of your most basic, like voting rights and things like this. And it's progressed. And I actually wrote a paper a couple years ago on what third wave feminism is. And that's all the equality, and a woman can do anything a man can do. And our government has, well, so she says there are some good things, but you don't probably also agree there's some very bad things that have come of it because of, what is it called? Latchkey children? Come home to an empty house? Well, that's not a good thing. So, has the good outweighed the bad? I don't know. I think with most anything, there's a good and there's a bad to it. Anything else before we move on here? Because we only got a couple minutes.
I think the main thing is that we need to consider as mankind and as human beings that God only created male and female.
Yeah.
And He gave us our duties and responsibilities for one or the other. We have to, as male or female, be submissive to God's will.
Yeah.
And accept what He has given us. He has told us, even in His Word, that it's not within mankind to guide His own footsteps. We see where that took us when we tried to.
Right.
So I think it's very, very important to us as Christians and as children of God to be submissive to those duties and responsibilities that He has given us, either as a male or a female, and be submissive to them.
Yeah. Well, in terms of, like, and Jamie kind of passingly mentioned this, of the roles of the parents, so I've got one son and one daughter. Well, a son hopefully can learn what a husband is supposed to be from me, and a father. But a daughter can learn from me what a father is, but also what kind of a man to look for. Hopefully. That's the ideal, that I can set because I don't know how many studies and the statistics on this, but and particularly for girls, boys it's more crime related if there's the absence of a father. With girls, if there's an absence of a father, it's more promiscuity. Because they're looking for some male to fill the role that dad didn't. And they'll go from man to man to man to man to find it. And so one of the bad things in our society is that government, and I want you to take this the right way, but because sometimes help is needed, but the welfare movement has encouraged single motherhood in our society. Because if there's no man and you have multiple children, you can get more money from the government. Well, why then would you tie yourself to a man if you can keep getting more money? It enables it. I think that's the word I was looking for. It enables single motherhood. And I don't care what you say. We're talking from the biblical perspective here. I do not care what you say. A mother cannot be a father, cannot do what a father can do. And a father cannot do what a mother can do. And the reason I know that's 100% true is because that's how God designed it. Period. You can have the best mother in the world, but a father can do and will do things that a mother won't do and can't do. And that's nothing negative against her. That's just the reality of it. So that's something to think about. All right. I guess I'm done. Yeah. Sure. No. When you reverse the roles, you're not doing anything close to right. And I think I want to get into that more next week, Lord willing, getting into Genesis 3 and seeing Adam do what he does in regard to the sin, the beta male, the subservient role. All right, thanks, guys.